Hi there. So I'm here today with a live Q&A. If you have any questions at all, please post them in the comments below and I will respond to those as quickly as I can. I'm going to cover first a little bit about the fabric first approach. If you are wanting to make your home much more energy efficient, and you don't want to spend loads of money and you're not really sure how things like solar thermal and photovoltaics and ground source and air source heat pumps and all these different technologies work, and you don't really want to have to deal with that so much, but you do want to have a nice warm home in the winter, a home that doesn't overheat in the summer. It's basically comfortable all year round and you're not having to deal with a load of embedded technologies to make that happen, then the fabric first approach is what you need to follow. So I'm Jane, I'm a chartered architect and I am a specialist in home eco refurbishment. I work with homeowners of period property with potential and help those homeowners turn their homes into beautiful, characterful homes that suit a modern lifestyle and help protect the planet at the same time. So the fabric first approach, what is it? Basically, it is a way of dealing with the building envelope. That's what we tend to refer to. So it's all the external surfaces of your building. That is the roof, the walls, the windows, and the floor. The ground floor. So that is all of the way, say, your average like little house. So all of the way around it, that's your envelope, all of the external surface area. And the reason you want to make that as efficient as possible, and by making that as efficient as possible, it means that you don't really need to put much heating on in the winter, and it means you don't need to do much in the way of cooling in the summer, because the building fabric, the build-up of the walls, the build-up of the roof and the floor, all of the doors that you have, that does the work for you, so you don't have to deal with faffing around with complicated controls and things that need regular maintenance and upkeep. You can make it much simpler for yourself by having the fabric of the building working at its highest efficiency possible. So those are really the benefits. You don't have to deal with technology. Technology, it costs a lot of money. It's a lot more expensive to install, say, a ground source heat pump, so that you're using the warmth from the ground to warm your home. That's a much more expensive system to install than simply making the roof and the walls and the floor much more energy efficient, so you're not losing as much heat in the first place, and so you don't need to put as much heating on. And likewise in the summer, it prevents your home from overheating, and as long as you've got things like windows that you can open, you can get cross ventilation, you can then make your home nice and cool and not need to worry about putting on air conditioning and fans even. Those are things you don't want to have running if you don't need them, because those things all take energy. So personally, I think it's a much better approach to spend more money up front, so it's the capital outlay is higher when you're looking at a really good quality fabric first approach. You're spending more money on the bricks and mortar. Might not be bricks and mortar, it might be timber frame or it might be something else, but you're spending more money on that and making sure that is as best quality as it possibly can be, and then you don't have to spend as much money or as on the technology stuff, and the technology stuff is always changing. It needs regular maintenance, it can break down easily, and it's easier to retrofit. Most of it is easier to retrofit at a later date if you want to have it. So I personally think spend your money on making sure that the building, the roofs, the walls, the floor is as best quality as it can be, and then later on, if you want to install an air source heat pump instead of your gas combi boiler or a solar thermal system or something along those lines, well, you can do it. there's no, you know, they are good technologies, but I think it's much better to reduce your need to have those technologies in the first place, because it's going to be a lot simpler. Your life will be a lot simpler, and you'll have a lot less maintenance and servicing costs going forwards, and you know, less likely to break down, and you're less likely to need to replace it. So another reason why it's better to follow a fabric first approach and make the fabric of your building better from the outset is because it's actually really difficult to change once you've built it. So if you've built it and you haven't put enough insulation in the wall, it's not so easy to come along later on and add more. I mean, it can be done, but it's just going to cost you more to do it later. And it's going to be more difficult to do it later than if you build all of the walls and the roofs, all of the fabric better in the first place. Make it much better than it sort of basically needs to be. You have to meet building regulations in the UK, and other countries have their own regulations as well. It's different everywhere has their own regulations that you have to meet. But that is a bare minimum. And you don't have to limit yourself to that bare minimum regulation. You can always do better than that, and it's not going to cost you so much more to do better than that. It's going to cost you less than the cost of, say, installing some technologies, and also the cost of running them, all the energy use that you're going to have. And so how do you do it? Well, you basically, there's a sort of a little phrase that's mentioned a lot, which is build tight, ventilate right. And so effectively you want to build with as little air leakage as possible. And that's quite difficult to achieve, really difficult actually to do it really well. And it's quite hard to find builders who are experienced at doing that when they are not builders who are building for, you know, bigger scale projects. So where you're working, say for example, on the type of projects that I do a lot of, where it's smaller scale, like house extensions and conversions and things like that, where your builders are not necessarily a really big outfit, then they don't necessarily have a lot of experience at doing that higher level of tightness. But that's not to say that they can't do it. It's just that they might not have very much experience of it, because it's not something that's often called for on the sort of retrofit home extension type work, because you don't need it to meet building regulations. You don't need to have a really high level of air tightness to meet building regulations, but you do if you're doing a lot of new build property, new build homes. They have to meet minimum air tightness regulations, and existing homes don't. So to make your home sort of future-proof as well, you could look to build to a much higher standard, because the thing with building regulations is that they're always changing, and certainly there are changes about to come into place, so they may actually have just come in for landlords, where they're not allowed to let property that doesn't meet certain energy requirements, energy performance requirements. So if you're looking at future-proofing your property so that in the future you would be allowed to, say, let it out, then you need to be looking at actually doing much better than what you would have to do for a basic home extension, where the regulations are not as strict and you don't have to meet such a high standard. If you look at things like social housing policy, they have a much higher standard they have to meet, and anything for a let has to be higher. But there are also it's also becoming more important when you're looking at selling your property as well. So you will have seen the energy performance certificate. Energy performance certificate basically is an assessment of how the fabric of your building works, how well it functions at maintaining heat when it's cold outside. And that is a very blunt instrument, but more and more people are interested in what does that EPC say about this property that I'm about to buy. And if it's really performing very badly, then they're maybe going to be less likely to either buy it, or they'll be pushing the price down because they know that if they want that home to be more comfortable, they're going to have to spend more money on the property to, you know, add in insulation. And like I've said before, when you're looking at retrofitting, yes, it is possible, always possible, to retrofit and improve the condition and the quality of the performance of the building, but it can be more tricky, and because it can be more tricky, it can then be a bit more costly. It depends on the building and how it's built, what materials it's made out of and everything, whether it's going to cost you a lot or not. And then the final way to how is to add more insulation, and so there's less heat loss. But it's not necessarily just insulation. It may be looking at things like your windows, whether you go from single glazed to having some better window treatments, whether that's shutters and thick curtains and things like that, or whether you're looking at replacing them for double glazed units or triple glazed units even, or using coated glass, e-coated glass, for example, that reduces the amount of heat that can radiate out of the window. So these are all different ways that you can do it, but the fabric first approach is basically looking at all the materials that the building is built up of and choosing a build-up that is going to work best. Another thing that I have a preference for is a breathable build-up, and I will go through what that means in a future video. If you're interested in knowing about that, comment below, and you know, I'm going to do it anyway, so if nobody comments, that's fine. But if you're interested in knowing more, if you've got any questions about that, then do ask me below. And that's it for now. I hope you're having a lovely summer. We've got beautiful sunshine here, and I will see you again next week. Bye for now.